All right, here's Lesson 3, War with Mexico. Discuss the causes of the Mexican-American War in 1846 and the controversy it creates amongst Americans, and what is the impact of this war on sectionalism? How does it create conflict between the North and the South? Mr. Polk, 1844 election, becomes president, Democrat, expansionist, pushing for expansion into Oregon, also has visions on Texas as well as California here in the future. And when he becomes president, he is going to, once our first year of office gets going for him, is going to push Congress to go ahead and join Texas as a slave state in December 1845. This is done by a congressional resolution, annexation. Mexico not too happy about this, but this actually was preceded by Florida becoming a state in March of 1845. Becoming our 27th state. To balance things out a little bit, Iowa entered the Union as a free state in 1846, and by the time we have 1846, we have a north-south score in this contest between sections of the country, being set at 14 for the North and a total of 15 slave states for the South. So the South has a bit of an edge of senators in the United States Senate to block anything that's going to go on in the United States House of Representatives, which is controlled by population, heavily dominated by a highly populous North. So our progress and expansion of free and slave states, it's moving right along. It's going to get more intense here now with our war with Mexico. If you want to check out the wiki, check out the wiki. This particular moving map is there for you to kind of look at and review and see a progression over time of westward expansion and how slavery and free states march right along with it. Again, it's a competition. Whatever ends up, when we get our little tootsies in the Pacific Ocean over here, the game is done, and it's going to be a situation where somebody on each section of the country is going to want the most states to have control of the Senate and ultimately perhaps control the destiny of the nation, slave or not slave. So this New Mexico territory is a vast region. It is about a third of the size of the United States at that point in time, and it includes the states that you see here. The Spanish had been settling regions in the outskirts and the edges of this area for a very long time. The conquistadors had been there and explored it fairly well. Santa Fe was established by missionaries in 1610. So there are people here, of course, as well as Native Americans. In 1821, Mexico becomes independent, and as we mentioned before in Lesson 2, they started welcoming American traders, giving them, because of the money opportunities here, the economic growth capabilities here, and giving away of land grants and things like that. A guy by the name of William Becknell reached Santa Fe with a supply of goods, and he establishes this other trail into the west called the Santa Fe Trail, which also starts in Independence, Missouri, which is also the start point for that Oregon Trail in these late 1830s into the 1840s. And it becomes a very busy trade route for Americans who are now settling in and bringing American ideas into this to become the Mexican territory or Mexican cession in the future here. So manifest destiny and manifest destiny thinking spreading there. California, late 1700s, was settled by the Spanish explorers and missionaries as well. There's a long chain of missions that went up and down the coast here, and of course missions were used to convert Native Americans to Christianity. But Native Americans there, like other Native peoples in Central and South America, had been basically utilized as slave labor, for example, like the encomienda system in the past centuries in those regions. And once Mexico becomes independent in 1821, those Mexican settlers basically bought up the mission land. They set up some huge estates called ranchos, and the Native Americans basically worked the land for food and shelter and were a system of labor for them there. The rancheros in charge of the ranchos basically treated Native Americans, again, kind of like states. And so by the time we get to the 1830s, the 1840s, we have this vast network of trails where people are flowing into the west. Westward expansion is heavy. It's really unstoppable. And Americans in the 1840s are reaching California in larger and larger numbers. An individual by the name of John C. Fremont, Army officer, is going to explore into the West, and actually he's going to write a book about the West and what he sees in California. People are going to read it back in the East, and of course that's going to spur more people to come there. He's basically says how awesome and great it is. The climate is incredible. It talks about basically adding California to the Union as a possible future goal, and of course talk this spreads everywhere else. And this would be a great opportunity for the United States to basically gain this side of the continent and this coastline and the ports that are already there and access to trade out here toward Asia, and the United States could become a middleman between Asia and the rest of the world. And at the same time, we could kind of push another foreign country out of the way a little bit. And it just seems natural that we should have this, is kind of the mindset. So President Polk, coming into office in 1845, really has this and campaigned on this issue of expanding the United States, Oregon, California, and Texas. And he really kind of had in his mind that war might have to happen here in order to attain some of these things. And if it were to happen, though, it has to be a situation where it's going to make them look like the bad guys and that they started it. And there is a disagreement here again that we inherit by annexing Texas. We inherit the border trouble here that Texas had with Mexico, and Mexico never agreed to the Rio Grande as Texas had claimed. The United States now takes that same stance. Mexico says it's the Nueces River, which is right here, and it moves up into this direction is the area they claim it to be. So there's a vast green area here that's conflicted over or argued over and disagreed on in the conflict spot here with the border dispute. And in order to get this to happen, to gain Texas and New Mexico territory and California, Polk sends a representative, a guy by the name of John Slidell, to Mexico. And they make the offer to buy it for $30 million, make the Rio Grande as the border, and the U.S. would then also pay for all the debts that Americans owed to anybody in Mexico to make sure everything is free and clear and nobody has any problems or bones to pick with anyone else. Mexico refuses, basically issues a statement to the effect that they're going to reclaim Texas someday, and they don't recognize Texas and as being independent part of the United States. It was taken wrong, and there was always kind of some sort of, in their mindset, a conspiracy of the United States that brought things as they were. So with the rebuttal of response of no, President Polk sends General Zachary Taylor with armed forces down to the disputed border area, down to the Rio Grande. I believe this is present-day Brownsville, Texas. And, of course, if a military force comes into an area that another nation claims is theirs, it's probably going to result in some conflict, and it does, and they are attacked by Mexican forces. For whatever reason, kind of a who fired the first shot kind of a scenario. Nobody really knows. It's kind of a little bit iffy. And by and large, the event is taken by the president to Congress as a first strike against us by them, and they have disrespected us. They have not been willing to deal on diplomatic terms, and so we need to declare war. And once the declaration of war happens, and the declaration of war is given, there is this debate, even as the declaration of war is about to be voted on, and in Congress deciding on it, as to what this is all about, and how did this really happen. And there are a lot of details that weren't very clear in all of this. And there are sections of the country in the north that aren't too thrilled about this declaration of war, but in the south, of course, southern slave states being near Texas and near and kind of in the southern half of the continent that would extend out into the Mexican territory, they're very much in favor of this. So one representative from Pennsylvania in the north draws up a provision providing that there should be no slavery, if you read through it, no slavery allowed in any territory obtained from Mexico. This causes a significant reaction by Southerners. And this is also supported and echoed by many members of the Whig Party. And if you think of the Whig Party, you think of the Federalists, and you think of it being heavily a Northern party. But of course, there are also Southerners as well who are Whigs. But there are conscience Whigs, and if you would annotate for yourself here that these are Whigs of the North who are a bit concerned about what the purpose of this war is, and that it's all a land grab to expand slavery, they're challenging this. And the principle of this war isn't maybe very solid. But in the end, almost all of them vote for the war. Manifest Destiny is very strong. One of those heavy opposers of the war is young Abraham Lincoln, just recently, just that year, getting elected into the House of Representatives for his state, Illinois, made a speech and a statement and addressed Congress, resolving that the spot in which all this happened needs to be clarified, and went through a list of different questions and different details about who, what, when, where, why, how. And Mr. President, these need to get cleared up because it seemed a bit vague and a bit funny in a way, you might say. But it happens anyway. The will not proviso isn't going to pass, but it does generate a strong response from the South, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. The other response is that there is a reform movement going on in multiple areas we'll start talking about in the future here in the United States, one of them being the abolishment of slavery. And part of that is, and it's very strong in the North, is the Transcendentalist movement. And the Transcendentalists are very much into ethics and very concerned about the materialism of the nation and the spread of unjust things. And two of the key writers and literaries of the time, Ralph Waldo Emerson, were very critical of the war, as they were also critical of the Trail of Tears and all that kind of thing. But Henry David Thoreau, who wrote Civil Disobedience, went to jail because he would not pay the tax to pay for this war that was established to pay for the war. Basically, you should disobey unjust laws. And this might sound familiar to you if you know a little bit about Mohandas Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Those individuals read Civil Disobedience, and that is what they practiced to attain their change and protest what was unjust in society and the world and get the change. And so, disobey unjust laws. It did happen then, and it carries forth into the future significantly. So this Wilmot Proviso basically was a proposed addition to the Declaration of War after it was passed, and was going to ban slavery. Southern reaction, they go crazy, they turn into purple minions, and one of those purple minions is, we should color his face purple here, John C. Calhoun of South Carolina, former vice president, nullifier, hater of the tariff, all of that kind of thing. They protest. This is a plot by Northerners. It endangers slavery anywhere. Any talk of a ban or limit on slavery is opening up the possibility it could be banned or limited anywhere else. And this particular new territory we get, New Mexico, California, needs to be open to slavery. So he counters with another proposal, and that proposal is that Congress nor any territory should never have any authority to ban or regulate or limit slavery at all in any way. It doesn't pass, neither does the Wilmot Proviso, but it got a major debate and major argument going on in which both sides become very paranoid about what the other side is intending to do, and that they are acting out against the interest of the other side or our side. And it is going to keep carrying forward in sectionalism, and the difference between the two sections of the country continue to grow. Polk's war plan: drive out Mexican forces out of the disputed border area, seize New Mexico and California, and take Mexico City, which is way down here. Land of Veracruz, a very old Spanish port where galleons flowed out of here with gold and silver and resources from the new Spanish Empire back in the day, and take Mexico City. It'll all happen. The Bear Flag Republic is established when a small group of Americans capture Sonoma, California. They proclaim independence there, and John C. Fremont, the famous explorer out in the West, and another one, Kit Carson, mountain man of the West, meet together with some of the individuals that are like-minded there, join forces, and basically they go out waging battles and wars to free California. Californios, people have been living there for a very significant time, of course quite outraged, and it's basically like a little civil war between people living there and the Americans that are led by those two individuals. In July 1846, the United States Navy captures a few key ports, San Francisco being one of them. The commander there, Commander Sloat, declares that California has been annexed, of course not without consulting Congress. And San Diego as well are captured, then Los Angeles, and by the time we get to January 1847, California was fully controlled by U.S. forces or individuals. There's Kit Carson at the bottom down there. Mexico City is captured not long after as well. General Winfield Scott does so. Again, he sails on some ships to Veracruz and marches inland toward Mexico City. There are battles along the way. It's a very quick and not too difficult a war for the United States. The Mexican government surrenders at that point in time. And there is some talk that maybe we should keep going and take more territory, but it is going to stop where we see it here on the map. And the treaty is signed in 1848, in which the Mexican government is forced to cede, C-E-D-E, one of your key terms, the areas that you see here, the Mexican cession in the light brown here, giving up claims also to Texas. They must agree on the Rio Grande River border, and that California and New Mexico will be gotten for or given away for $15 million. I guess the first proposal of $30 million was a better deal. So they got a lesser deal plus a war. Mexico loses half of its territory in this. So it's a significant move, and basically we have manifest destiny kind of being almost achieved. Not settled yet, but almost achieved. And we'll talk about this Gadsden Purchase a little bit later. So this is our Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Mexican cession. Now the question becomes, what happens out here with slavery? Who decides? Nothing has been decided. Does it say in the Constitution who can say? It does not. So therefore, it must be the people who ever move here. They have to decide. That would be the Southern point of view, correct? Coming from Texas, there's the Southerners. But if you're a Northerner and don't want to see slavery expand, then you might say, well, maybe Congress should, since Congress is in control of and specifically allowed to establish territories, but doesn't say what kind of territory Congress can make. But maybe the necessary and proper clause would allow Congress to say if there was slavery there or not. Thus the fight between the two sides. Each has a legitimate argument. How is this going to work? And this is going to result in near war by the time we get to 1850, especially since in Lesson 3, coming up in a little while, we have gold discovered in California, 1848, and the 1849 gold rush begins, and we have a massive number of people moving to California, and you almost have to have a government to keep things under control. So if they come in, California comes into the state and they have a government there, then what kind of state are they going to be, and what does the balance of slave and free states look like then? And thus we're going to have a compromise. So slavery, the slavery issue is reignited with this Mexican-American War. The Wilmot Proviso stirs things up significantly and creates some long-standing discomfort by Southerners. We have a massive amount of land increase here with this. 13,000 Americans die, mostly by disease. It is kind of a precursor to the Civil War, and the people that fight in this Mexican-American War will be the people that fight in the Civil War between the states, and they will be fighting each other, and they know each other very well in many cases, especially the officers and some of the key leaders in this war. It emboldens Americans in this expansionist movement, this manifest destiny. It's just happening. It's moving. There's nothing to stop it. At the same time, Latin American countries will start to see the United States more and more as a colossus of the North, or a bully that is basically pushing everybody around, and bad relations really start to begin here more and more with the United States into the future with the Latin American countries of the South. So make sure that you do your essential question and your terms for this lesson, and move on to the next one, Lesson 4, California, Gold Rush, and Utah.